Hello and welcome to Indus News live from Islamabad. I am Muneeb Hamid with the news of this hour. Let's begin with the headlines first. Britain has approved the world's first COVID-19 vaccine by Pfizer-BioNTech for rollout from next week. The United States says it has made preparations to enable the immediate mass shipment of vaccines. Meanwhile, from 5 Chinese vaccine candidates, 4 have reached phase 3 of the clinical trials before seeking regulatory approval. Pakistan has already approved funds to buy a vaccine against COVID-19, which has claimed over 8,100 lives in the country. Global death toll by the new coronavirus has exceeded 1.48 million, with over 63.8 million infections. Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has announced to establish the first special economic zone in Gilgit-Baltistan. Addressing the oath-taking ceremony of Gilgit-Baltistan cabinet, Khan said work is underway to grant provisional provincial status to this region. The Prime Minister has also announced a complete health coverage for the people of Gilgit-Baltistan. United States President Donald Trump's campaign has filed a petition challenging Wisconsin's presidential vote results. Meanwhile, Attorney General William Barr has discredited Trump's claims of mass electoral fraud in the election. Barr says the Justice Department has found no evidence of fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's chief governing partner Benny Gantz says his party will vote for an opposition bill to dissolve the parliament. The move can force a 4th election in Israel in under 2 years. And this year, Netanyahu and Gantz joined hands to form a government with 2 years each as the Prime Minister. And in football, Liverpool have qualified for the knockout stage of the Champions League after beating Ajax 1-0 at home. Curtis Jones scored his first goal of the league at Anfield to give a crucial victory to his team in the Group D clash. Well, these were the headlines. News in detail coming up after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now let's have the news in detail. We start from Britain, which has approved the world's first COVID-19 vaccine by Pfizer-BioNTech for rollout from next week. The US says it has made preparations to enable the immediate mass shipment of vaccines. Meanwhile, from 5 Chinese vaccine candidates, 4 have reached phase 3 of the clinical trials before seeking regulatory approval. While global death toll by the new coronavirus has exceeded 1.48 million, with over 63.8 million infections. With critical breakthroughs in COVID-19 vaccine developments, countries have started preparing for immunization drives. Brazil has decided to vaccinate its indigenous people and health workers first, as the country recorded 697 fatalities overnight. The nationwide death toll has crossed 173,000, while in the United States, an advisory panel of the Centers for Disease Control has recommended that nursing homes and health workers be immunized first. Hospitals across the country have started making necessary arrangements for vaccine deployment.
So we are very fortunate at the Jackson Health System. We are expecting the COVID-19 vaccine. We have the -80 refrigeration freezer needed to store the vaccine. We are expecting the vaccine in mid-December, so we are ready to make sure that we are deploying the vaccine to our employees.
Meanwhile, the European Union has also given a clear time frame to its members for the start of their vaccination programs. Germany is preparing vaccination centres across the country for the launch of its immunisation drive in the first quarter of 2021. And in Asia, India's coronavirus death toll has surged to over 138,000, with more than 9.4 million cases. November proved to be the deadliest month for the Indian capital, New Delhi, with over 100 daily fatalities. But New Delhi says not everyone will need to be vaccinated.
Our purpose is to break the chain of virus transmission. So if we are able to vaccinate a critical mass of people and break that virus transmission, then we may not have to vaccinate the entire population.
Japan has approved a bill to provide vaccination free of charge, with its majority elderly population extremely vulnerable to the virus. While Pakistan has recorded 75 more deaths from COVID-19, pushing the toll to 8,166. This is the country's highest daily deaths since July.
The Health Ministry says 2,829 infections were reported overnight. The country has recorded 403,000 infections so far, out of which more than 345,000 people have recovered. Meanwhile, Prime Minister Imran Khan has called for national collective efforts to fight the second wave. Presiding over a meeting of the Federal Cabinet, the Prime Minister asked for timely purchase of coronavirus vaccine. The Cabinet has approved a $150 million grant to procure vaccines, with healthcare workers and the elderly a priority.
And Pakistan has called for emergency financing for coronavirus in developing countries to avoid economic collapse. President and Pakistan's envoy to UN Munir Akram said this at the 25th anniversary of the World Summit on Social Development. He said no one can be safe until coronavirus is defeated globally. Akram called on the United Nations to ensure everyone has access to a COVID vaccine. He said unless the poorer countries are helped to revive economic growth, the world will be unable to overcome the triple challenge it confronts: the virus, the recession and the climate change. The ECO-SOC chief also urged for making the world's financial, trade and technology regimes fairer. Now, Pakistan's Prime Minister Imran Khan has announced to establish the first special economic zone in Gilgit, Baltistan. Imran Khan says the government will focus on promoting tourism in the region. Addressing the oath-taking ceremony of the GB cabinet, PM Khan says work is underway to grant provisional provincial status to the region. The Prime Minister also announced a complete health coverage for the people of Gilgit-Baltistan. Khan says 1 million rupee will be allocated for each household for availing medical treatment at any hospital. It says the government will also develop skiing areas in the region to promote tourism. Moving on, US President Donald Trump's campaign has filed a petition challenging Wisconsin's presidential vote results. The swing state certified President-elect Joe Biden as the winner after a recount in 2 counties. The petition was filed as Attorney General William Barr discredited Trump's claims of mass electoral fraud in the election. Barr says the Justice Department has found no evidence of fraud on a scale that could have affected a different outcome in the election. The Trump campaign has said the Justice Department did not conduct a thorough enough investigation. Meanwhile, President-elect Joe Biden marches towards presidential transition, forging his administration. Unveiling his team of economic advisors, Biden named former Federal Reserve Chair Janet Yellen as U.S. Treasury Secretary. Now, Saudi Arabia has criticized Iran for implicating Riyadh in the killing of a top Iranian nuclear scientist, Mohsen Fakhrizadeh. Saudi Minister of State for Foreign Affairs said Iran is desperate to blame Riyadh for anything negative happens in Tehran. In a tweet, Adil Al-Jubair said engaging in assassinations is not the policy of Saudi Arabia. Meanwhile, Saudi Arabia's representative to the United Nations condemned the killing of Fakhrizadeh as a loss of entire Muslim world. He urged Iran not to escalate the situation, as emotional and spontaneous reactions will not bring positive outcomes. Meanwhile, the UN says a two-state solution is the only premise for a just, lasting and comprehensive peace between Israelis and the Palestinians. UN General Assembly President Volkan Bozkir was addressing the Legislative Committee on the Rights of the Palestinians. He criticized Israel's attempts to erode the status of Jerusalem, threats of annexation and the inhumane blockade in Gaza. He said these recurring activities severely curtail the fundamental rights and freedoms of the Palestinians. Voskeir asserted that the rights of Palestinians are not up for negotiations. He said only constructive negotiations between the parties and adherence to UN resolutions will bring about a durable solution. Meanwhile, in Israel, Benny Gantz, the chief governing partner of Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu, says his party will back an opposition bill to dissolve the parliament. The move can force a fourth election in Israel in under 2 years. In an address, Gantz said Netanyahu's refusal to support a budget proposal shows he wants to take Israel back to the polls. Gantz said the only person who can prevent these elections is Netanyahu, as he is responsible for the present situation. Shortly before Gantz spoke, Netanyahu released a video on Twitter in which he urged Gantz to vote against the measure. Netanyahu said now is not the time for elections, but unity. Moving on, the US and Turkey take aim at each other during a virtual meeting of NATO foreign ministers. The outgoing US Secretary of State Mike Pompeo accused Turkey of aggravating tensions in the Mediterranean. Pompeo said Ankara gave a gift to the Kremlin by purchasing Russian anti-aircraft missile system. Turkish Foreign Minister Mevlut Cavusoglu fired back at Pompeo, accusing him of urging European allies to forge an alliance against Turkey. Ankara's top diplomat said Washington was blindly siding with Athens, escalating regional tensions. Cavusoglu also accused the US of backing Kurdish terrorist organizations in Syria. The meeting was primarily intended to focus on a new report on how NATO should adopt for the next decade. Now, Russia has deployed its new S-300 air defense system on the disputed Kuril Islands near Japan. In a statement, the Defense Ministry said the system can counter ballistic and aerial attacks. It said short-range anti-aircraft missile systems were already on duty on the island of Iturup in Sakhalin region. The Russians seized the island at the end of World War II. A territorial row has prevented Japan and Russia from signing a formal peace treaty. Tokyo is highly sensitive to military moves by Russia on the strategic importance of the chain of islands. Now moving to Argentina, where investigators raided the home of Diego Maradona's psychiatrist under a judicial order. They also searched Agustina Koshashov's private office in Buenos Aires. In an interview, Koshashov's lawyer said the prosecutors were investigating a possible malpractice. Vadim Mishanchuk said these were routine measures when investigating a patient's death.
She gave her statement as a witness, and this raid forced me to turn up in order to talk to the prosecutor, and I found out she is being investigated. So we could say that if she is being investigated, that means she could be charged.
Now, Pakistan has extended greetings to the United Arab Emirates on its 49th National Day, or Yawm al-Watani. Pakistan's Consul General Ahmed Amjad Ali sent virtual felicitations to the UAE leadership and people. Ali said bilateral relations were based on mutual trust, common faith and values. He said Islamabad seeks to strengthen ties with Abu Dhabi. Some 1.7 million Pakistanis living in the UAE have contributed to the country's development. Meanwhile, in India, talks between the centre and farmers demanding a revision of controversial farms law ended inconclusively. The protesters and government agreed to meet again on Thursday. Mass protests continue as the deadlock on the ground persists. Prime Minister Modi's government passed laws ending its mandatory procurement of products at fixed rates. The farmers say the three laws are a death decree for farmers, as they will be exploited by big corporations. Farmers have rejected the expert committee set up by the Modi government, saying such panels have never led to any outcome. Still in India, where 8 people have been killed in a road accident in the northern Uttar Pradesh state. Police say 2 people sustained injuries and are undergoing treatment at a local hospital. The accident in the Kaushambi district occurred after a sand-laden truck overturned and fell on a SUV. 10 occupants of the car were returning from a wedding. Police say security and rescue officials have arrived at the scene and are taking appropriate action. More news coming up in this bulletin after a short break. Stay with us. Welcome back. Now moving on with the news stories. The toll from an accident in the western German city of Trier has risen to 5. 15 people were injured when a speeding car plowed into a pedestrian area. A 9-month-old baby was among those dead. Witnesses said people screamed in panic and some were thrown into the air by the car as it crashed through the shopping zone. Police said they have arrested a 51-year-old German suspect and is now being questioned. A prosecutor says the suspect had drunk a significant amount of alcohol, ruling out the incident as a terrorist act. New Zealand has declared a climate emergency, pledging a carbon-neutral government by 2025. In a motion, the country's parliament acknowledged an alarming decline of species and global biodiversity. Addressing the Parliament, Prime Minister Jacinda Ardern termed climate change one of the greatest challenges of our time. Ardern said Wellington had to act with urgency. She mentioned that the government sector will be required to buy only electric or hybrid vehicles. The fleet will be reduced over time by 20% and all 200 coal-fired boilers used in public buildings will be phased out.
Government, we are also announcing the carbon neutral government program that requires government organisations to be carbon neutral by 2025. We must get our own house in order. How can we stand and take a leadership position amongst the private sector unless we take the same action that we expect of them? It will require government agencies to measure and reduce their emissions, and if they are unable to achieve carbon neutrality, they must offset.
New Zealand has joined 32 other countries having declared a climate emergency. Now moving on to Australia, where massive bushfires have forced thousands of tourists to flee the northeastern Fraser Island. Nearly half the island has been scorched during the first major heatwave of the season. Clouds of smoke could be seen rising from the island's tropical rainforest. The Queensland State Fire Department says over 1 million litres of water and fire retardant gel have been dropped so far. In a statement, the emergency services said conditions were unpredictable and could change rapidly. The blaze on Fraser Island was sparked by an illegal campfire 6 weeks ago. Now, a mysterious metallic monolith appeared on a hilltop in Romania's mountainous Nimt County last week has vanished. The metal structure measured 2.8 meters. A video shot by a local newspaper showed the monolith, which made a hollow sound when tapped. Police say officers are conducting an inquiry as the structure was illegally installed on a protected archaeological site. The hill is the site of the ruins of the Batka de Amnai fortress, identified as the ancient Dacian settlement of Petrodava. This comes after another similar metal structure was spotted in the U.S. state of Utah about 2 weeks ago. Mysteriously, the monolith disappeared after a few days of discovery. Now, a rare skeleton of a sabre-toothed cat is expected to fetch between 60,000 and 80,000 Swiss francs at an auction next week. The skeleton is estimated to be some 37 million years ago. Details in this report.
In Switzerland, centuries-old skeleton of a prehistoric predatory mammal is all set to be sold at an auction house Pegay. The fossilized skeleton discovered in the rocky badlands of South Dakota belongs to a robust animal which hunted horses and small rhinoceros.
Il y a vraiment un grand intérêt du public.
There is really huge interest from public in general for everything related to dinosaurs and prehistory. And I think it's because of the numerous films and video games that came out in recent years.
The primitive skeleton mounted on a piece of wood is prepared to be the star lot among 40 others at the auction on December 8. According to the head of Swiss-based seller, the specimen was better than others which have come in recent years.
It's new. It's something we haven't seen for a long time. It has developed over the last 5 years, maybe a little bit more. Big collectors start to drive up prices of exceptional pieces such as this kind of animal. It is universal dimension, no religion, no culture. It speaks to all of us wherever we come from. It's from before our time, and I think it's one of the rare artistic sectors which really has no borders.
The auction dedicated to paleontology is hoping to attract online bidders.
Now in Puerto Rico, a massive telescope at the Arecibo Observatory that had been deteriorating since August has collapsed. The telescope aided 57 years of astronomical discoveries. The U.S. National Science Foundation says the radio telescope's 900-ton instrument platform fell yesterday. It added no injuries were reported. Two cables supporting the reflector dish had broken since August, causing damage and forcing officials to close the observatory. The telescope was one of the largest in the world. It was used to study distant planets, potentially hazardous asteroids and potential signatures of extraterrestrial life. In a historic first, a Chinese probe has successfully completed the drilling, sampling and sealing of lunar soil after landing on the moon's surface. Details in this report.
China was late to the space race. It did not send its first satellite into orbit until 1970, but it has caught up fast. In a first such attempt by any country in 40 years, Beijing launched a mission to return moon samples to Earth. Now the Chang'e 5 probe is gathering samples from the moon's surface as planned. Earlier, the China National Space Administration said the Chang'e 5 probe successfully landed on the near side of the moon.
This movement is the first step. It steadily landed on the surface, very steady and very good. It lays a very important foundation for the next drilling and collecting.
The material will provide further understanding of the geological evolution of the moon. It will provide necessary information for better understanding the solar activity. Last year, the Chang'e 4 probe touched down on the far side of the moon, the first space probe from any nation to do so. This time, the probe selected the site and touched down on the north of the Mons Riumker in Oceanus Procellarum, also known as the Ocean of Storms.
Although we have done the landing twice before this mission, this time the lander is heavier than the U2 lunar rover, and so it is harder to control it with a higher requirement for its precision.
If successful, the mission will make China the third nation to have retrieved lunar samples after the US and the Soviet Union.
In business stories now, most European stocks have edged lower, tracking mixed sentiment in their US and Asia-Pacific counterparts. The pan-European stock 600 slipped marginally, with autos shedding over 1%. Frankfurt's DAX and Italy's FTSE MIB have slid around 0.5%. The CAC 40 in Paris too edged down fractionally, but London's FTSE has risen following news of the UK green-lighting COVID-19 vaccine. Earlier, Asian stocks traded mixed, with the mainland Chinese shares sliding, while Japanese, South Korean, Australian bourses gained. As the Brexit transition deadline approaches, the Netherlands has let out a monster to warn truckers to get ready for Britain's exit from the EU and all that it entails. Details in this report.
Although Britain technically left the European Union at the start of 2020, there has been a one-year grace period before the introduction of traffic controls, now set to begin. The Netherlands, one of Britain's closest trading partners, brought out the Brexit Monster due to concerns the coronavirus pandemic has reduced awareness around Britain's departure.
If you're looking at the 1st of January, then a deal or no deal is for the port operations not relevant, especially not on the short term, because from the 1st of January on, the UK ends the transition period and the internal market ends. And from that date on, all custom formalities and sanitary and phytosanitary formalities have to be in place.
Around 40 million tons of goods are shipped between the Netherlands and Britain every year via Rotterdam port. It is also the main hub for cargo passing from other EU member states to Britain.
Around 3,000 or 4,000 trucks are coming in or going out to or from the UK, and we expect that around 100 or 200 trucks in the beginning, in the first weeks after 1st of January, won't have all the custom formalities in order and have to leave for a temporary parking place.
The Netherlands, the Eurozone's fifth largest economy, expects to incur $2.7 billion in direct costs by 2023 as a result of Brexit.
Liverpool have qualified for the knockout stage of the Champions League after beating Ajax 1-0 at home. Tuesday's encounters in the Champions League were crucial in deciding the final round of 16. Details in this report.
As the knockout stage approaches, the UEFA Champions League is heating up. Curtis Jones scored his first Champions League goal at Anfield to give a crucial victory to the Reds in the Group D clash. In another group match, Midtjylland drew 1-1 with Atlanta for their first point in the tournament this season. In Group B, Shakhtar Donetsk shocked Real Madrid 2-0. In the other Group B clash, Inter Milan beat Mönchengladbach 3-2 in a thoroughly entertaining encounter. Atletico Madrid could only draw 1-1 against Bayern at home, following a late penalty from Thomas Müller. FC Porto and Manchester City advanced to the next phase after the two played out a goalless draw in Group C.
One more member of the Pakistan cricket team has tested positive for COVID-19, taking the overall tally of infections to 8. 6 of the 53-member squad had tested positive upon their arrival in New Zealand, while another case detected last week. New Zealand's health ministry says the team is not allowed to train. It will remain on the holding pending considerations by health officials. The Pakistan Cricket Board says all those who return negative tests are expected to be able to train in managed isolation. The first T20 is slated for the 18th of December at Auckland, while the last test will be played at Christchurch on 3rd of January. South Africa paceman Kagiso Rabada has been ruled out of the one-day series against England after sustaining a right adductor strain. He is expected to take 3 weeks to recover. The pacer has been released from the squad and the biosecure environment in place for the England tour. Cricket South Africa said his release will ensure his rehabilitation ahead of the Test series against Sri Lanka. South Africa plays 3 ODIs against England starting this weekend. And now let's have a look at the weather updates across the globe. Well, that is all for now. For the latest updates, you can follow us on social media at Indus.News. Take care.